Hello wonderful person, this is Anton, and today's video we're going to be talking a little bit about the division designer in Hearts of Iron 4, and I wanted to do a kind of a beginner's guide to basically the most effective units that you can construct, because honestly when you just start the game, if you just open up one of these things, it does get a little bit confusing. Like, what kind of a division should you be making? What should you be putting in here? Should you be just kind of filling these up completely, making them look something like this, or should you be focusing on something else? It's a very complex sort of new addition to the game, and in this video, hopefully I'll make it clear for you. Alright, so let's start. And in this video, I'm going to be using my Soviet invasion of the United States to kind of demonstrate some of these new division templates. Anyway, so we're going to go in here, and actually when you just start the game, this is what a regular division looks like for the Soviet Union. And we're going to open them up. I think this is the ones that they have the most. It basically is 9 infantry divisions, and then there's 1 support artillery. The one that you also be using a lot is this Mechanizirованный Korpus, and this is what it looks like. And none of these are actually that efficient. The specific value we're going to be looking at is this number right here called combat width. For both of these, it's actually 18. You're always aiming to create this to be about 20, and I'll explain to you why in a second. And if you actually look at the mountain division, it has 24, so that none of these are actually what we want them to be. But before we start talking about all of this, let's actually just go through some of the different divisions you can create. So there's obviously main infantry division. You'll have a lot of these. This will be your bread and butter. This is what's going to be basically doing most of the fighting. You'll have a few mountain divisions, and this is with most nations you'll be playing as. These are great in the mountains, but they're not so good in anything else. You may want to create some sort of mobilized division, but it's not really a requirement. But it's nice to have something that moves fast and can follow your other division that's going to be doing a lot of fighting, and that's your tank division. So here it's called Mechanized Corpus, but we are going to rename this later on. And then, of course, if you're playing as a nation that has a lot of, like, for example, an island nation like UK, a lot of naval invasions, you may want to also create the Marine Division, which we don't have as a USSR in the beginning. And also, if you actually plan to do airplane-based invasion, if you want to do paradrops, you may want to get paratroopers, but I honestly don't recommend getting this because it's kind of difficult and kind of not worth it. And it is a lot easier to do using either Marines or Mountain Divisions instead. Anyway, so we're going to now go back to the US here and take a look at the perfectly sort of designed, or I guess it is almost as perfect as I could get it, perfectly designed infantry division. So I have like 242 of these, and this is what it looks like. So as you can see, the combat width here is 22. It's not 20. It's 22, and there's a reason for that. It's because some countries like USSR and Japan, they get certain generals. Like, for example, this guy right here, Mikhail Tukhachevsky, that gets something called offensive doctrine. And this essentially decreases the combat width of your units, allowing more units to fight on the same in the same battle on the same map. This is kind of possibly confusing still, but I'm going to kind of break this down to you. So basically think of it this way. So we're going to go in here and create a new division just so you can kind of see how it works. So right now I have 1 infantry unit. It has a combat width of 1.6. And it says right there, if you actually scroll over it, it says usually every battle has combat width of about 80. If you're attacking from 2 sides, it increases by 40, becoming 120. If you're attacking from 3 sides, I believe it's going to be 160. And essentially, if in a normal battle, 1-on-1 battle, you can have total amount of 80 width. So meaning that in one of these infantry divisions, you want to have approximately 20, just to be on a safe side. And so just to be on a safe side, we're going to create this so that this becomes 20 or possibly 22, but let's just aim for 20. We're going to add another infantry battalion. And as you can see, as soon as I add one, this basically doubles. And some of the things here change as well. So for example, my organization, which is very important, actually decreased a little bit for some reason, and my HP did as well. But we also need to have these values. We want to have as much soft attack and hard attack as we can get, and also obviously defense as well. So let's actually add a few more. We're going to add 8 divisions, giving us combat width of 12.8. So this is pretty good. We can actually obviously add even more, giving this almost 20. But the problem is that our soft and hard attack will not be very high neither will be our defense. And for this reason, you want to actually mix it up a little bit and add something that gives you a huge boost to attack and obviously defense as well. One of the best things to do is to add either artillery or possibly tanks, but I believe artillery is actually one of the better things you can do. So we're going to put artillery in here, and as you can see, it has suddenly jumped to 15.8 because artillery does have a relatively high width, but it also adds a lot of soft attack. Now with 8 different infantry units and 3 artilleries, I get 21.8. Now this is a little bit higher than I want because not all of my generals have this so-called offensive doctrine. Some of them don't actually have it. So just to be safe, we may want to actually replace this with something else, like for example, anti-tank. So now we have, look, 2 artillery, 1 anti-tank and 8 infantry divisions. We have relatively high organization, relatively high soft and hard attack, and our combat width is just under 20, meaning that we can have 4 of these divisions fighting basically in every battle. And this is actually a relatively good start. These support units, you can put 5 of them here. They don't actually increase anything, but they do increase your total stats. And so this would be a kind of a good start. So this is, in the beginning of the game, this is actually a good starting setup, starting division. You may not actually have anti-tank just yet, so you may want to leave them as 2 artillery for in the beginning of the game, and then as soon as you research anti-tanks, put them in there as well. So this would be a pretty good sort of initial infantry division. But most of my current divisions actually look like this. They have 10 infantry units and then 2 artillery on the sides. They have slightly higher soft and hard attack, slightly higher organization, because infantry actually does give you a huge boost in organization. And my combat width is 22, so I do rely on these generals that essentially have the offensive doctrine, because if they don't, I can only then fit 3 of these units per battle, which is that already I'm basically losing 1 unit. I'm losing a lot of soft and hard attack from every battle. Now let's actually put this into action. So let's go to this guy. Where is he? Now let's go take a look at this guy right here. He's actually currently just standing there. He doesn't actually have offensive doctrine, so in his case, he can only use 3 of these units to attack. I'm going to show you what I mean by this, by just kind of launching an attack here and clicking on this. Now right now it says 110, and that's because I'm playing as a Soviet Union that actually has something called mass charge that you get to kind of acquire later on, which also increases your combat width dramatically. But if I didn't have this, if this was just the beginning of the war, when before I actually get to research this, I would only actually have 80, this would be 80, but even with 110, I can only have 5 divisions here. And as you can see, most of my divisions are actually in reserve, so there's 14 divisions in total. Only 5 are fighting, and they're not actually fighting that well because they're basically out of resources. And most of them are just kind of waiting. However, defenders, these guys, they have 7 divisions. If they were stronger than us, if they had higher parameters, if they had higher defense and soft attack, they would easily win this battle. As a matter of fact, most of the time they will win this battle. However, in this case, I'm going to win mostly because my forces are slightly more fit than theirs. So essentially, in most cases, for most of your games, you want to have this around 20. As USSR or as Japan, you can have this as 22, but then you also have to micromanage a little bit more. So basically, if I just kind of remove 2 of my infantry units and add 1 anti-tank unit, I get almost 20, which is absolutely perfect. This would actually be sort of a bread and butter infantry that would do most damage and would have the most effective attack and defense as well. And the same goes for other divisions, like for example, Mountain Division. I have 22 as well, so there's 8 Mountain Divisions and 2 artillery units as well. My Marines are also very, very similar to artillery and 8 Marines. And as you can see, all of them actually have these support units. Usually I choose the ones that give me most attack and most things like breakthrough, for example, which is very important, especially if you're playing as an offensive country that does a lot of attacking. But then also, we have other divisions, like for example, paratroopers. Now, paratroopers require you to basically lift them and take them somewhere. So in this case, there's actually only 2 divisions. And this is mostly because they're not meant to fight. They're only meant to secure the ground and essentially cut off the enemy or possibly take territory relatively fast. But they're not going to be doing a lot of fighting, and they won't actually do a good job at fighting. And if you add more of them, unfortunately, you'll need a lot more airplanes to lift them as well. So it's not as efficient. I have another division right here. This is my military division that usually prevents partisan activities or basically secures the area and prevents resistance. And here I have just like 6 of them just so they can kind of fight. But the most important unit here is the military police. And you don't really need anything else except for the MP unit. And this will do a pretty good job at essentially holding ground and preventing resistance. You can actually even decrease the infantry number if you don't want this many. And now we come to one of the more important units, and this is our tank division. I actually have 2 because they do slightly different versions of attack. And here, once again, you do want to have same combat width, but it's a little bit more difficult to give these divisions a lot of organization. Now, technically, you could actually just do this. I essentially have 10 modern tanks. These are basically the best attacking machines I have. They have relatively high, or I guess super high breakthrough, soft attack, hard attack. They're really, really good at fighting. But the problem here is this. Their organization is abysmal. As a matter of fact, they won't really be able to attack for very long. And if someone attacks them, they will most likely collapse and run away. So that's not a good strategy. You need to actually have something that can give them higher organization, which means you may want to use something like mechanized infantry, which allows you to have much higher organization and yet still maintains relatively high defense and relatively hard attack. And as you can see, my organization is now 27.8. It increased quite a lot. I could actually add even more because my combat width decreased here. And basically what I came up with after playing around with this and also reading some of the forums on Paradox Plaza, this is actually a pretty good setup for a tank division. I have 2 modern SP artilleries, which basically provide quite a lot of soft attack. These are mobilized artillery units that in the beginning you won't really have them. You can just replace this with a regular artillery, but later on these are great. I have a medium tank or modern tank in the middle. There's only 3 of them here. And then, just to increase our organization, I've added 4 mechanized infantry divisions. Now, all in all, this is an amazing unit to basically have, you know, a breakthrough or to defend as well. These are great for a lot of different activities and things. And you can actually change this a little bit just so that it may suit you a little bit better. If you want more defense, you can add more mechanized infantry. If you want more attack, you may want to add a different kind of artillery, like, for example, adding a modern tank destroyer will obviously increase your hard attack a lot more, or adding more SP artillery units will increase your soft attack. And if you're feeling really, really crazy, you can also add things like super heavy tanks, which will slightly decrease your certain parameters like speed and organization, but will give you incredibly tough and powerful units. And by the way, these are actually super long to make too, so I wouldn't really recommend going with the super heavy tanks, but modern tanks or medium tanks are great. And my second unit here is essentially meant for anti-tank attacks, and this one has modern tank destroyers, which originally were just the anti-tank units right here. So these are basically meant for pushing through enemy tank units and trying to gain ground as fast as possible, because this is why everything here is mechanized or has relatively high maximum speed. And so both of these units I usually use for attacking and possibly using some sort of a pincer maneuver just to kind of surround the enemy and then cut them off from the rest of the units that might be trying to protect them. But there's actually at least one type of a unit that is not limited by combat width, and this particular type of unit is the island defense unit. So this is actually with countries like US and Japan, and here you can actually go crazy and add as many infantry divisions as you can and try to increase your defense score and obviously soft attack and hard attack as much as you can, because you'll usually just have one of these defending an island or something else. So here's actually kind of a simple example of how you could make this. It has come with a 47, which already means there's only one of these that can be used anyway. But basically what this unit can do is essentially, you know, is going to stay on the island and then use its really high defense factor and relatively high soft attack factor to kind of fight against the enemy. So if you're playing as Japan, for example, you'll experience this quite a lot. You'll have both the British and the Americans trying to invade your land, and at some point, you know, like for example here in Okinawa or Iwo Jima, you may want to actually place one of these units and just kind of keep them there, and they'll be able to quite easily support themselves and will not actually be easily defeated by the enemy that decides to invade these islands. And I think this is actually probably the main division type where you can kind of have as many of these as you want, just to increase these numbers as high as you can. But for every other division, it's usually highly recommended to have this around 20-ish. 22 is maximum where you should be going to, because otherwise you won't really have too many divisions fighting. So actually, very recently I read a forum post where someone was saying that this particular division was very successful at essentially fighting, at destroying various types of other divisions. But the thing is, if you look at the combat width here, it's 44. If you're playing as the Soviets, you might be able to use 2 of these per battle, but normally most countries will only be able to use 1 of these per battle. So, okay, you'll have 1 of these fighting, they'll have a soft attack of about 760, and their organization is 38.8. However, you can actually use 4 of these divisions in the same battle, and even though there is a soft attack of only 400 and organization of 40, you can essentially multiply this by 4, giving you soft attack of 1600, which is the double of that previous division I just showed you, which is not only more, but is also easier to produce. These divisions you can actually produce relatively quick. If you go with this type of division, it's going to take you forever to make this, because you need to produce a lot more anti-tanks, a lot more artillery units, and obviously a lot more infantry weapons as well. So this will be at least 2 or possibly even 3 times longer to make than a much simpler division that looks kind of like this. And so all in all, this is actually one of the better sort of setups for infantry and for armored units. So once again, this is a pretty good setup for Soviet or Japanese infantry. Here's a pretty good setup for a normal country that doesn't actually have those really cool generals that allow you to have lower combat width. Here is a mountain division for a regular country, or for Japan and Soviet Union, you can add 1 more to make this 22. And then the same thing for the Marine division as well. And then we come to the really cool tank divisions. And here, this I chose to be 20 because I didn't actually have any tank generals that had this really cool offensive doctrine, unfortunately. As a matter of fact, all of my tank generals have everything but that particular really cool trait. I don't think I actually have that many offensive doctrine generals, unfortunately. So all of my tank divisions look like this, but if you do have an offensive doctrine general that you like to use, you can also add something else here, like for example, another medium tank to make this 22. But other than that, you will have 3 tanks, 2 artillery units, and then 4 mechanized or motorized units, depending on which one you have available. I don't think any other units are that important to modify, so the paratrooper unit is usually good as it is, because even if you use it, you want it to be as light as possible. And the only unit that you may want to kind of play around with to make it as defensive as possible is, of course, the unit that will be staying on the islands and protecting your land from the invaders. And I think this is actually a pretty good setup for this defensive unit, although I would probably change this to regular artillery from anti-tank artillery just to give it a little bit more defense. And so this right here is actually a pretty good island defense unit, or a unit that you can possibly put right here along the Normandy coast, where most of the time you'll have either British or the Americans trying to invade anyway. And these will actually be able to protect those particular areas quite well. And well, anyway, so that's all I wanted to talk about in this particular video. I just wanted to kind of explain how this whole template division designer thingy works. And because when I just started the game, it was really confusing, but after a bit of reading and after a bit of experimenting, I finally found a perfect way to construct a perfect infantry division for each country. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, check out some of the other Hearts of Iron videos I've posted, and also subscribe for more. I'll see you guys in the next video, game you later, and as always, bye-bye.